Welcome to Small Talk by Sfarim Chatter. I'm Nachi Weinstein. On this episode of Small Talk, I'm going to be joined by Rabbi Dr. Mordechai Schiffman, who is an assistant professor at Yeshiva University's Azrieli Graduate School, the director of leadership scholars at the Sachs Herenstein Center, the associate rabbi at Kingsway Jewish Center in Brooklyn, New York, and practices as a licensed psychologist. And we'll be discussing actually two books, really. The newest book, titled The Torah of Character, Psychological Growth Through the Weekly Parsha, published by YU Press and Kodesh Press, as well as his first book, Psyched for Torah, Cultivating Character and Well-Being Through the Weekly Parsha. So, similar, but I guess we'll find out what the difference in the two. So thank you, Rabbi Dr. Schiffman, for joining me.
Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be here.
Okay, so what can you tell me about your books, both of them?
Sure. So my books are drawn from my love of Torah and my appreciation for the field of psychology. I have two clear memories from high school when I was asked what I wanted to be when I grew up. And in one conversation, I said a rabbi, and in another, I said a psychologist. Years later, I was unable to choose and decided to do both. But I don't really see those paths as competing. I see them as one integrated pursuit. My overarching goal, both professionally and personally, is to help people, myself included, become the best versions of themselves, to live meaningful spiritual lives. And in my experience, the most powerful way to do that is by bringing together the wisdom of Torah and the insights of modern psychology. Together, they create this space for real, personal, communal, and spiritual flourishing. So Psych for Torah and Torah of Character are my attempts to explore that integration, using the weekly Parsha to show how the Torah speaks directly to our inner lives, our emotions, and helps promote character growth.
When there's a couple of things, but let's first, before I talk about the difference between the two books, but how do you combine that? So how do you combine psychology and Torah? And I know I feel like lately and recently there's been more of these type of books and things coming out, but how does one do that?
Sure. So I'm going to answer that perhaps in two parts. First, just in terms of an overall framing, not the how as the process. Maybe I'll do that later. But for now, just in terms of the how, in terms of the why, really. And Rabbi Jonathan Sachs has language for this that I really love. He speaks about Torah and science in terms of a great partnership between Torah and wisdom. And for me, psychology is one of those forms of wisdom. It helps describe our thoughts, our emotions, our behavior, our relationships between people. And the Torah itself is deeply concerned with human psychology, our emotions, our failures, our motivations, our capacity for growth. And psychology helps us understand this in a more formalized scientific way. So it provides language, it provides organizing tools for how to think about these things. Psychologists spend an enormous amount of time, resources studying human nature and what actually helps people improve and flourish. So why wouldn't we use the best available tools for character growth and behavior change in service of Torah's values and goals? What
sources do you use when, especially this is not, and I'm asking this because it's a standard question I ask in Small Talk, but this is not your typical, this is another interesting sefer on the Torah. This is a little different, as you just said.
Yeah. So in order to sort of give you a description of the sources I use, and I'll sort of name drop what gets in there, it is a very eclectic group. I think the best way to answer that is to sort of give a little background in terms of my process of how I would write an essay. So from, I believe it was 2019 to 2021, I would write one essay each week on the Parsha. And those pieces were published in places like the Jewish Press, the Jewish Views, and Aish.com, as well as on my own website, psychedfortorah.com. The second round was published from 2023 to 2024 as part of Yeshiva University's Sachs Herenstein Center, where I work with Dr. Erica Brown as part of their weekly newsletter. So each essay had a hard deadline. I had to write one every single week. So my process generally looked like this. I'd first read through the Parsha with an eye towards anything that flagged to me as something psychological, a construct, a theme about human beings, something like emotions, gratitude, conflict, leadership, courage, resilience. And sometimes that immediately just reading through the Parsha gave me a strong lead, and I could anchor the whole essay around one pasuk or one scene. Other times, I just have to keep reading until something grabbed me. So I would start consulting a wide range of Parshas Sfarim, often dozens, stacks and stacks on my desk, trying to see what the Mefarshim are noticing and whether I could begin to string together any coherent ideas. So I would tend to start with the explicitly psychologically oriented or psychologically sensitive writers, somebody like a Rabbi Dr. Abraham J. Torsky, who I quote a lot, Rabbi Zelig Pliskin, Rabbi Dr. Tzvi Hirsch Weinreb, and Dr. Aviva Gottlieb Zornberg, who tend to explicitly bring in psychological ideas. Then I would move to writers who offer rich conceptual frameworks, maybe psychologically adjacent. They read into human experiences. People like Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, who's going to be incredibly important for the Torah of character, which I'll get back to a little bit later. Professor Nechama Leibowitz, Rabbi Norman Lamb, Rabbi Joseph B. Soloveitchik, Rabbi Baruch Simon, and even Hasidic Musar works like Nesiva Shalom. Then I would look through, I just keep going, go through Vort-like Sfarim, like Rav Pam, Rav Moshe, Rav Yerucham, see if I can start stringing together different ideas. And hopefully by the end of this, I found some cluster of concepts that I can start putting together in my head as being related to each other. And if I found a specific verse or pasuk or a scene that I would want to dive into, then I would look at the Rishonim and the Achronim. It would be great if I could find in Otzim or Farshei Parsha some sort of Likut Sefer that would bring together all of these ideas, but oftentimes I would have to go through, classical Mikros Gedolos or online types of sources. And I'd go through and I quote Rashi, Ramban, Ibn Ezra, Sforno, Rabbeinu Bachya, Radak, Abarbanel, and through the help of Otzim Farshei Parsha, sometimes find some gems like, Rav Shmuel ben Chafni Gaon, who I wouldn't have come across just from my own general looking through the sources. Then I would go through the Achronim that were either quoted or see them, Malbim, Shadal, Netziv, Chassam Sofer, Rav Hirsch. These are all people I'm quoting, Hasidish, Sfarim, Sfas Emes, Shem Shmuel, and Musar played a very important role here. We're talking about psychology, people who had tremendous depth of understanding of human psychology. Rav Yerucham, Rav Volbe, Rav Dessler, Rav Simcha Zissel, Rav Aaron Kotler, Rav Hutner, are all quoted. Even in the later in Torah of character, sometimes I engage with some academic material, Professor David Schatz, Joshua Berman, Alex Green, Shlomo Naeh, if it was helpful to construct my idea. So the short version is that I would start with the Parsha, look for the theme, open up a wide range of Torah sources. Then I start thinking about the psychological construct, the research, the theory that relates to the theme that I tracked in the sources. Oftentimes these were concepts that I already had knowledge of or expertise in, but I would often try to dig even deeper into the psychological frameworks, because my goal for each essay is not just to make a surface level connection between a general Torah idea and, oh wow, Mazel Tov, it's connected to some popular psychology concept. The real sort of creativity and insight comes from the deep work, so I would dig deeper both into the Torah and to the psychological literature. These aren't just they aren't just psychological therapeutic ideas, but really it's the broad field of psychology. And I could quote to you the psychologists that I quote, but I'm not sure that's helpful at this point. If your listeners would be interested in that, I can give them follow-ups.
Maybe, and I was going to ask this at the end, but I'll ask you here. We'll kind of split the question, like not who it's for. We'll leave that for later, but. Someone listening to this is already listening to you say, and you just talk about this, psychologist there. Wait. I'm not a psychologist. I just want to read a book on the Parsha. Is this for them? Like, would they enjoy it? Or is this like towards those interests who are in the field of psychology?
Yes. So 100% this is for everyone. I would say that I write everything for a broad general audience. I have like a few different specific people in mind when I write who are not psychologists, and they're not even Torah scholars. So I try to write everything that has some sort of connection and relevance, and so anybody can pick up on it and really appreciate the insights. Psychologists may have a deeper insight. Psychologists may even be more likely to say, I don't like that idea, perhaps, if they have a different approach to something that can be, and I'm happy to discuss. But it's really for a broad audience. You do not have to be an expert in anything to appreciate the essays.
Okay, so now the two books, are they the same and just more of the same in the second one? Are they different? And if they differ, how do they differ?
Sure. Okay, so when I started writing Psyched for Torah, my general goal was to connect psychological ideas for the weekly Parsha. But as a rabbi, I naturally gravitated towards themes that related to meaning and inspiration and personal growth. It was actually later, when I was reviewing the table of contents in the final stages of publication, that I noticed how consistently the essays centered around growth and meaning and well-being. And that realization helped lead to the subtitle of Psyched for Torah, which is Cultivating Character and Well-Being Through the Weekly Parsha. The second book, Torah of Character, is a sibling to Psyched for Torah, but it does have distinguishing features. So first and foremost, it begins explicitly with the goal of character development. Each essay is intentionally shaped around a specific character trait or moral quality with the aim of inspiring growth. Psychology is still very much present, but it sometimes recedes into the background. And in some of the essays, I lean even more heavily on moral philosophy and don't even quote psychology. In addition, each chapter includes a brief character challenge that offers concrete suggestions for what to work on during the week. That was something that did not exist in Psyched for Torah because, again, the presence of character is the essential frame. There's two other things that shaped the Torah of Character. So number one is that the project officially began before October 7th, but all the essays besides from Bereshis were written and published afterwards. So as a result, the tone of the book is inevitably infused with the rhythms, the confusions, the raw emotions of that post-October 7th experience. Some essays, particularly right after October 7th, address this explicitly, others more subtly, but Israel and the broader Jewish experience was always directly relevant to the essays. And then finally, Rabbi Sachs plays a gigantic role in the Torah of Character. He has an influence in Psyched for Torah as well, but not as essential and important. These essays were written for Torah of Character through the Sachs Herenstein Center at Yeshiva University, which is a center that was put together in memory of Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. And each essay includes a relevant quotation from Rabbi Sachs and engages directly in this idea. Some of the essays directly engages ideas in the body of the essay, not every essay, but minimally there's a direct quote about Rabbi Sachs. And besides for those explicit references, I'm deeply indebted to his broader influence, right? His model of writing and seriousness that he gives to morality and his ability to integrate deep parsha analysis with general wisdom.
Okay, so can you give some examples from both the books?
Sure. So I would like to sort of categorize the examples into two different buckets. In some cases, and this is sort of like to get a feel for what and how psychology and Torah are integrated together, right? The process of how that happens and what that looks like. What do you get from this combination that you wouldn't get from just doing psychology or just doing Torah? So in some cases, category one is, in some cases, the Torah uses emotionally vague or metaphorical language. And that vagueness perhaps is intentional, but it invites the Mefarshim to read the text in very different ways. So thinking about it psychologically helps me slow down, notice the perhaps emotional nuance, and better appreciate the way that multiple interpretations exist in explaining those emotional, psychological terms within the Torah. And I'll give you a few examples of those in a second. But first, to the second category. The second category is slightly different. And that's when psychological concepts serve as almost like an organizing structure, the tools to help us understand the Torah material, and sometimes actually sharpens what the Torah is demanding of us, either ethically or spiritually. So sometimes psychology helps us read the text more carefully, and other times it helps us understand the concepts more clearly. So first, let me give you some examples from category one, where the language in the Torah invites us for multiple interpretations, and the knowledge of psychology and human condition allows us for various nuanced readings to come out. So one of my favorite examples is in Yaakov's encounter with Esav. The Torah tells us that Yaakov hears Esav is coming with 400 men, and he is Vayira Yaakov ma'od vayetzer lo. Yaakov is very afraid and distressed. Okay, so that's somewhat redundant to what seems like saying the same thing over again. And the Torah doesn't explain the details. So the Mefarshim go in different directions. Rashi talks about this. Others, some say Yaakov was afraid of being killed and distressed that he might have to kill Esav. So each word means something else. Others say he was anxious about his family, and then he was distressed about his possessions. Some say he was distressed precisely because he was afraid. He was disappointed in himself for feeling fear, despite the fact that God promised him protection. Abarbanel reframes this and says that courage doesn't mean acting without fear. It means acting rationally despite fear. So even that still treats fear as something negative, needs to be overcome. Well, what the Abarbanel seems to be hinting at here is that, and this is a insight from psychology that's focused in my therapeutic work and is a key aspect of therapeutic technique, is that not all negative emotions are unhealthy. So that anxiety, the distress, isn't automatically unhealthy. So anxiety can actually be functional. It can motivate, it could prepare us, it could sharpen, it could focus us, and to protect us from danger, right? And there's a beautiful textual opening for that reading. So Rabbeinu Ephraim, who's one of the Balei Tosfos, understands Vayetzer not as emotional distress, but as like tsar, narrow, right? So in other words, Yaakov was afraid, but that fear narrowed, Vayetzerlo, it narrowed his focus to the task at hand. And that's exactly what happens. He plans diplomacy, prepares for battle, divides his camp, and he davens. So Yaakov isn't acting well despite his fear. He's acting well because of the fear. The fear helps him focus. So the Torah isn't teaching us to eliminate the anxiety. It's teaching us how anxiety, when channeled properly, can actually help solve problems. So that's one example from the first category. Happy to give you more examples, but I'll go to the second category and give you an example from there. I'd like to turn to Parshas Kedoshim, and this is actually a topic that comes meant to mention, by the way, that what I just said in with Yaakov is actually over two separate essays, one in Psyched for Torah and one in Torah of Character, where I take it in slightly different directions, and I just unified it here together in one concept. And there's actually another time where I have similar essays that are about similar topics that go in different directions in terms of assertiveness training. So that starts in Parshas Kedoshim, where the Torah tells us that don't hate your brother. Don't hate your brother in your heart. Reprove your fellow. Don't bear sin because of him. And I relate this to a therapeutic technique that, again, I was trained in at the Albert Ellis Institute. There is a famous psychologist named Albert Ellis who distinguishes between three different reactions when someone hurts you or causes damage to you. One is to be unassertive, almost like a doormat, to be passive. One is to be overly aggressive and angry and sort of fight back. And the third is assertive. It's where you communicate clearly what is bothering you. Right? So unassertive is when you keep it in, which often turns into resentment. Aggressive is when you lash out, that usually backfires. And assertive is when you communicate what happened clearly and directly, but you don't humiliate and you're not hostile. And the Rambam actually, if you read the Rambam based on Parshas Kedoshim through this, actually seems to be describing this process. Right? So the Rambam says, Lo sisnas achicha bilvavecha is don't hold it in passively. Don't resent. Don't be unassertive. Hocheach tochiach esamisecha. Rather, you should be assertive. Communicate in a way that tells them what is bothering you. Velo sisal av chet. Don't create a sin while you're doing that, meaning don't be aggressive, don't embarrass them, and go into the other extreme. Right? So the Torah seems to here be giving and mapping on to this therapeutic process that Albert Ellis delineates in his therapy. And then in Parshas Kedoshim, in Kedoshim, that gives us the theory. In Parshas Pinchas, it gives us a model with Bnos Slavchad, right? They walk into a public, intimidating setting and they advocate for their future. But they do it with remarkable balance, right? They approach, Vatikravna, right? They stand, Vatamona. They speak clearly, but they're not rebellious. They don't threaten. And God responds in an affirming way, right? Cain Bnos Slavchad Dobros, right? The daughters of Slavchad speak correctly, right? Through the lens of this assertiveness training, right? There's a clinic in what to do correctly. Strong, clear self-advocacy without being aggressive. And what's powerful is that the Torah treats that style of speech. It's spiritually admirable, right? It's not just socially effective. This is what God wants us to do. So this is another example where the structure, the psychological structure, when I know those concepts, I'm able to then go look into the psukim and pull out and extract and create, see that framework within the verses as well. And there's dozens or so of other examples where that comes out, where the Torah, through the prism of psychology, we have an added insight that we might not have had otherwise.
Who's the book meant for?
So I had a broad audience in mind while writing these books, and thank God the feedback I've received confirms that they're reaching a wide and diverse readership. When I write, I try to keep in mind people from many different backgrounds, interests, levels of Torah and psychology experience. Each essay is meant to be accessible to someone without a yeshiva background, without any formal training in psychology, because the core idea should be meaningful and inspiring on its own. At the same time, there is an intentional depth in both the Torah analysis and psychological synthesis, so readers with more background, often find additional layers to appreciate. I know that rabbis use the book to generate drushos, schools incorporate them into parsha classes, and many people use them at their Shabbos tables. I've also been very encouraged to hear that the books are being learned in kiruv settings as well, which is one of the reasons I was happy to partner with H.com. The ideas are meant to resonate across the spectrum, and thankfully they seem to be doing just that.
What are you trying to accomplish with these books?
So I come back to where I started, right? So my goal in life, and not only with these books, but in my roles as a rabbi, a psychologist, a professor, and God willing with future books as well, is to offer inspiration, guidance for living more meaningful and spiritual lives. And these books are meant to create weekly opportunities to connect with Torah, with Hashem, to reflect honestly on our inner lives, to take responsibility for becoming more kind, compassionate, empathetic, and helpful people. Engaging with these texts, especially when they're learned and shared with others, can help place us on a path toward personal, communal, and spiritual flourishing. And that's really my goal, again, with these books, but in a broader context as well.
And you mentioned future writings there. Are you working on anything now?
Sure. So, my overarching goal sort of remains the same, but I'm trying to amplify it and diversify both the format and the genre of my work. So I have currently 2 manuscripts that are being submitted to publishers. One is tentatively entitled Pursuing Virtue, which is psychological insights on Pirkei Avos, which applies a similar methodology to what I've done here, but focuses on Pirkei Avos as a sustained guide to developing virtue and character. And the second is a Haggadah project, which is a combination of edited essays that I've collected from various people, scholars, rabbis around YU, that also includes a running commentary. And that running commentary that I'm writing integrates psychology, Torah, and education. And that's being published in honor of my mentors, Dr. Ronan Novick, who is the dean of Azrieli and hired me onto the staff, and Dr. David Pelkovitz, who is my teacher and mentor, who really inspired me to go into this field. And then the next phase takes it even further. So I'm working on developing a Torah-oriented psychological framework for happiness, well-being, and flourishing. That includes 2 complementary projects. One is a more popular style book, accessible, practical. It's not anchored, though, in a singular sort of primary text like Torah, Parsha, Pirkei Avos, Haggadah, etc. And the other is a more academically oriented study of flourishing within rabbinic literature, which I hope to pursue as I coming close to the end of what, God willing, will be a second doctorate at the Bernard Revel Graduate School at Yeshiva University, where I hope to be able to say something insightful that's methodologically sound related to the development and Chazal's view of flourishing and living a good life related to psychological and philosophical principles.
Very nice. Okay, we'll stay tuned. Yeah, I was going to ask, is it Haggadah? Because Haggadah, feels like the Haggadah is always, everyone's writing a Haggadah and this type of thing that you would want to put out on the Haggadah. Okay, so we look forward to that. And I will link to
this coming.
Okay, I'll link to both these books in the show notes. Again, available at Kodesh Press. I'll link to them in the show notes for those interested in purchasing them. And thank you, Rabbi Dr. Schiffman, for joining me.
Thank you. This is really a pleasure.